In almost all of my trainings around behavior, we talk about predictability and consistency and how important it is to have a consistent way of enforcing basic things like running in the hall and all that kind of stuff. And the most important thing about it is to get the adults on the same page. And we almost always run into the question of how can we be consistent? And then the other thing is, why in the world can't we be consistent? What gets in our way? Is it that we get tired? Is it that some people don't like certain rules? And whatever it might be, it really has stayed with me for a while to say, what are the questions or conversations we can have as a school that might help us to remedy that kind of wonkiness when it comes to being consistent? And so I was reading a book the other day, and you know how I love my books, so I wanted to share this reference with you. It's called Onward, Cultivating Emotional Resilience in Educators. So it's kind of a hefty book, but has some great concepts in there around moving forward, onward and upward, as we always say. But the three things I pulled out of this right towards the beginning of this book were these three things: organizational conditions, meaning environment and colleague care. How do we take care of the environment, and how do we care for our colleagues? The second thing is individual resilience, meaning how do we self-care? How do we take care of ourselves? And the third thing being systematic conditions, care and value of our profession. And we all know that, boy, we take a lot of hits as school districts and as teachers as to how people care and value us. And some things we have control over, some things we don't. But I think those three conversations are really important because we got to ask ourselves, how are we caring for the environment and our colleagues in our own building? So bring this back to your building and say, how do we care for ourselves? And that third thing, how do we care for our profession, regardless of what happens outside our door? Because we have control of those things right in our building. And so that, I think, are three good conversations to have, and we should be able, under each one of those things, to start brainstorming and say, how do we care for this environment, colleagues? Can we walk down the hall? And this is always a touchy question. Can I walk down the hall and see something going down and see a colleague standing right there and say and do nothing about it? And do I feel comfortable, not in front of the kids actually, of course, but do I feel comfortable saying to that colleague later, hey, you know what, I noticed that you were just overlooking that. And everybody always gives me that look like, I would never say that to a colleague. Why not? Why not? How are we going to be predictable and consistent if we can't help each other out? Sometimes we have bad days, sometimes we're just tired, whatever it might be. But if we had an environment that we cared for ourselves and cared for each other in our environment enough that nobody would get offended by that, we would actually turn our perceptions around and say, man, thanks for reminding me. You're right. We might be able to be more consistent, and we might stop having those conversations coming up where, why in the world can't we be consistent?